piles. And if I recall, I don't remember how many we counted. There's a lot. Okay? All stacked up, piled up, waiting for what? If it's going to be applied, how economic is it to bring it from one point, stack it in another, and then move it from there someplace else? Next slide, please. This is that same facility, just from a ground shot. Next one. Now you may say, okay, they're producing the waste here on this farm, which we call a factory. So that's all we have to worry about. Unfortunately, it's not. The difference with poultry waste is that it is transportable. It's what they refer to as a dry waste. So they can load these things into tractor trailers, tractors, whatever. And then you find what you see in this photo. Long rows of piled up chicken waste. The funny thing is with this, you can't see this. If you're driving on the road, you cannot see this field. So we have no idea where this stuff is being transported, how much of it's being transported, in what kind of rates is it being applied, because again, it's all this kind of a secrecy thing going on. Next slide. Just another little close-up to kind of give you an idea of the magnitude or the size of some of these piles. Next slide. They're showing up everywhere. This is actually in the Noose watershed. In some cases, they are very close to the roads. And it should be a concern for people because of the things that are contained in that. We talk a lot about the nutrients, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, but they're also heavily bacteria laden. Right? The one slide that Kemp showed of the one facility that had the piles and you saw the leachate, we actually did some testing there of that leachate. And if you're familiar with the term fecal coliform, fecal coliform is a bacteria. It's an indicator also of that E. coli is present. 200 colonies per milliliter, or per 100 milliliter. 200, 400 is kind of standard. Okay, we won't get into the exact science with that. But in that particular photo that Kemp just showed you, 60,000 colonies per 100 milliliter. This stuff is toxic. That's just the best way to put it. This waste is toxic. Next slide, please. Another example of where this stuff is. You cannot see this stuff from any road. The waste is going to bury us. If nothing else, just by volume. Next slide. We talk about what happens when that waste is exposed. And this is a photo actually taken by our colleague Rick Dove, just kind of showing what's it look like outside of one of these barns. Next slide. This is a photo of a facility in the Cape Fear watershed. That this is the liquid that is coming off of a pile of poultry waste and going directly into a water body. There is no control over what's going on. The state has very little monitoring. They have very little oversight. And as river keepers and scientists and attorneys, we have very little access to what they are actually doing, except to do it ourselves. Next slide. This is another one that the first picture is you see the piles kind of in the background, and then as we show the next shot, you can see now the pile kind of in the upper, sitting right on the bank of a nice little creek. Where's that going to go? Okay. This is actually one that we turned in as a referral because it was there for much more than 15 days. Next slide. Okay, that was the last slide. A couple things I would want to make just some additional points on. We talked about the transport of the feed, the transport of the animals. There's another transport that happens too, and it happens with all CAFOs, whether they're hogs or chickens or cows. There is a certain percentage of mortality on these facilities. Those animals have to go somewhere. What we are starting to see, as Kemp and Gray and I are in the field, is what they call them dead boxes. They look like garbage dumpsters that have dead animals in them that are going to be transported to a rendering facility. So that's another impact that we're seeing from having these facilities around us. you guys hold the key. And it is unbelievable to us to see the turnout here tonight. We made a mistake in Kinston because we didn't catch it. The issue in Nash County and in Wilson was a huge, huge win. Because what it did is it took the control of what was happening in a community away from the politicians, away from the industry, and put it in the hands of where it should be. And that's you all. So you are to be congratulated, first of all, for being here tonight. This is your community. This is your water. It's your air. Okay? It's also an environment that belongs to your children and your grandchildren. This is not just a local Cedar Creek Industrial Park issue. These poultry houses that are going to show up all across the landscape are going to be in your neighbors' backyards as well. Okay. They're not put off someplace where they can't have an impact. It's wherever they can find somebody who has land and wants to be a chicken farmer. And as you can see, this ain't your average chicken farmer. This is not my grandparents' chicken farm. This is an industrial factory, and it has no place in your community. Thank you. I'm going to bring up Dr. Mike Mallon. Mike is with